Okay, so this tutorial is how to build kind of like an endless carousel. And my goal for all the tutorials is to make them very customizable. So I went ahead and I already created a version of this to make sure I could get it to work. And this is what it looks like. So each one of these can have something completely different. This one has a text, this one has an image, this one has a text field, or actually this one is another text. This one is a button that toggles whether or not this heart is filled. It's just a little if then, that's not set yet. This one right here is just a random circle shape, okay? This one is the text field that I can change. I can make this say potato. And I can go back and look, it says now the text field says potato. So they're actually interacting with each other with a state variable, okay? So the whole point is that these are very customizable. I can put anything I want inside of these. I can even customize the height of it itself, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run through the code that I wrote in advance, and we're going to copy it in piece by piece. And you can pause and copy it in. I'll explain what every single piece is, okay? It did take a lot of trial and error, so that's why I'm not going to write it from scratch. It took a couple hours to make. So we'll create another single view app. Okay, we'll call this the code tutorial carousel, okay? And if you want, I'm going to actually have the finished file that you can just drag and drop. In addition to this finished product, you're going to actually have the one single file that you can drag and drop into your project, and then just call that one file whenever you need it, okay? And you can customize it as you want either. You can use it as a starting point. So code tutorial underscore carousel. I'll say next. I'm going to put on my desktop. I'm going to just new folder, code tutorial underscore carousel. All right. Create. And the first thing I'm going to do off the bat is I'm going to create a new file, new SwiftUI view, and I'm going to call this the Carousel View. Okay. So I don't like where it is, so I'm gonna actually delete that really quick. Sorry, move to trash because I like to have it in the same group. Okay, so I'm gonna right click on any of these, when I want them in the hierarchy, new file. There we go. Now I'll do that same thing. Okay, so I'm gonna say Carousel View. It's such a little nitpicky thing, but it's really important to me personally because I've had too many issues with it when it doesn't happen like that nicely. So let's look at the carousel view. Okay, so the first thing we need to do off the bat, personally, whenever I create kind of this like reusable file, I generally get rid of the previews. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of that for now. You can keep it if you want. It's just gonna give you errors later because we're gonna be putting. I don't like feeding variables into it when we have things that need to be declared on the initialization. So when I go from when I look at the bottom here, I'm gonna drag a couple things in here. I want drag state. I really want this function in there. Okay, and we'll talk about what that function says. So this function is essentially what we're using to track how far we are in the process. If we look at the simulator, how far we have dragged in this regard, okay? So you can see this number up here. Every time I start dragging, it's tracking how far I've dragged. And when I let go, it goes back to 0. And it's using that because I'm only letting myself drag once. So this is actually not an H stack. These are all not actually next to each other in the horizontal sense, but rather this is a Z stack. They're actually originally all on top of each other, and I gave them an offset in the X dimension, okay? And that offset is being modified every time I initialize a drag gesture. So I'm not actually dragging through a scroll view in an H stack. Instead, I just have a drag gesture that is being tracked, and I'm using a state variable to set the left and right, or the X dimension offset, okay? So I'm going to save that. Now let's go look at the next thing we want to take. Actually, I'm not going to take this full fraction progress function. I just happen to have that because I thought I might be using it, and I ended up not using it. So do that, and we will go to look at the next few functions. So the next function I want is, so the way these are working actually is, if I have, for instance, let's say 7 views. In this case, I have 7 views, okay? So the main view is right here, and it has an opacity of 1. So a scale of 0 to 1. 1 being fully present, 0 being completely, you can see right through it, okay? It's clear. And 0.5 is like halfway translucent. So this is fully clear, this is fully clear, this is fully clear. So where are the other 4 of these 7? Well, the next one is actually right here, and there is one also like way over here, okay? And all of those together are the only ones that are present. So where are the last 2? Well, the last 2 are actually completely clear, and they're way off somewhere entirely different. I just gave them an X offset of like 1,000, which puts them all the way off to the right. But when they end up not next up on either side, but when they end up on deck, like way over here, okay? So not the main one, not one away, but two away in either dimension. They get to their position, and then they become completely opaque. So only the 5 are present, but then the other ones are way hanging out off onto the sides. And then when they're on deck, they go to their proper on deck position, and then they become present. So that way we get this kind of coherent look, okay? So that's an important thing to understand, where they are at any given time. And that affects my decisions to change their opacity and their offset. So let's look at this function. This function, get opacity, is saying, I'm going to give you the index. I is telling me where, I essentially is just, it's a parameter I'll feed in. We'll talk about what I is at any given time, okay? But saying get opacity, and whether or not it's opaque will be determined by the I, or the index of the view in the array, relative to where I am in here. So essentially it's just determining if it's not either this one, or this one, or this one or this one, then it's going to be completely translucent. So that's what it is. So these, if then this set of conditionals that have an or, this is an or, right? So if it doesn't work with any of these conditions, then it will be completely transparent. Otherwise, it'll be completely opaque. So I'm going to grab this whole function, and I'm going to bring it over. Okay. So it doesn't like that I don't have this relative location function yet, but we'll get there, okay? So next up is the get height, okay? I'm going to bring that one over next. Get height is essentially just saying if the relative location, or where we are, let's go back to this. The relative location is essentially where in that list of views we are, okay? And this is view number 2. So if the relative location is 2 and the view we're looking at is view number 2 in the array of views, then the height is going to be equal to, if we look at that function, then the height will be equal to a variable that we'll be setting called item height, okay? And if it's not, then the height will be equal to item height minus 100. So the reason it's saying, well, we don't have something called a variable called item height yet is because item height will be something that will be passing into it, okay? So the whole point, that what you need to gather out of that is that item height is, let's say 500, for example. That's this right here. And if you're not this one view, then you're going to get item height minus 100, okay? So we will grab the next function. Let's get some of these so we can get rid of some of these errors that we're looking at, okay? So let's get item height, okay? I'm going to grab that one. And now this is the project we're working on together. If you're ever confused between what I was, making my own personal trial on versus where I'm copying things into, you can look at the names of the project. So you and I are developing code trial under carousel, and I'm copying code from what I previously created, which was in this project. Okay, so just so you don't get confused. So what I need to do is I need to take, I cut a variable from here, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay, that variable is going to be item height, and it's going to be of type CG float, and it has no default value. Okay, that should get rid of this error right here. Okay, it will when we give it the next function. And the next function I want to give it is get relative location. Okay, so get relative location is a little confusing. Let's put it in here. So what I'm advertising that we're making here is an infinite scroll thing, okay? And technically it's not infinite scroll, okay? What we're actually making, do you notice that, let's go all the way back to the beginning, okay? I want you to notice that what we're doing is, all the way to the beginning, here's item 0, okay? So if you notice, we're on page 0 out of 6, okay? Ignore this 1 out of 7. This is just some, you're not going to show on a professional UI, you're not going to show 0 out of 6. But coding things start from 0 and they move upwards. So this is view 0 out of 6, okay? View 0 on a scale of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I'm at 1, and I'm at 2, and I'm at 3, and I'm at 4, and I'm at 5, and I'm at 6 out of 6. And now it should restart, right? So when I scroll forward, this is going to say 0, because we restarted, and that's the relative location. Relatively speaking, we're back at the start. But I'm actually tracking it as number 7, and it's just doing a division thing. So it's checking the remainder of, if I have 7 views, it's taking how deep we are into the right. It's dividing how far we are to the right by the number of views we have, and that remainder is our relative location, okay? So if we look at that relative location function, it's essentially taking, it's saying that our relative location is going to be equal to this is the remainder sign. It's not division, right? Division is just that. So the remainder is this. So we're saying the relative location will be equal to, ignore this section right here, just pretend that doesn't exist. It's going to be equal to carousel location in the remainder of when you take carousel location and divide it by views.count, okay? And views is the views that we're using to actually, each one of these is a view, okay? So we're taking that remainder, and that's going to be our relative location. Now, the reason I have this here is because I don't want to deal with, negatives if I start going this way, right? Instead, what I'd rather have is, if I go here, this relative location, I should actually probably even change this text here because it's false advertising. This is showing carousel location. Our relative location actually is views.count times 10,000 plus carousel location. So what it's really trying to tell you is we do technically have an upper limit of how far you can go to the right and to the left, okay? You can go to the right all day long, okay? You can keep doing this all day long, but you can only go back 7,000 times or 70,000 times because I multiplied views.count times 10,000. There's 7 views, so the point is this is setting an upper limit to how far I can scroll. But for the request that was given, the health app, you're not going to have 7,000 left scrolls like this. The odds are just not going to happen, okay? So this relative location is letting us essentially continue to scroll left as much as we want and keep everything in the positive, okay? That's what relative location is. So now I'll cut relative location. I'll bring that into our project. That should get rid of a lot of our errors there. All right, now it's giving us some other errors. We're slowly bringing things from one project to the other. The next error is we need to pass in the views that we've been creating, okay? So views is going to be a list, or it's going to be an array. We're going to put views inside of carousel view up here, underneath item height, okay? And views is going to be an array of any view, and it's going to have no default value, okay? One thing I needed to do actually was I needed to take relative location and get opacity. I need to take both of those, okay? And I need to put them inside of carousel view, okay? There we go. And the next thing, and get height. Get height also needs to be inside of the carousel view. So the carousel view now contains the relative location function, the get height function, and the get opacity function, okay? Drag state is still outside of everything, okay? Drag state could be in another file for all we care, but the point is we're keeping it all kind of condensed into one file. So the next few things we need to pass over from our old project to the new one is you need to have these other two variables. Let's talk about there. You're going to go into carousel view, and you're going to want to have one state variable called gesture state, okay, and that's going to track our drag, okay, and it's going to look like that, okay. You're going to have one other state called carousel location, okay, and carousel location gets changed every time we successfully drag left or right, okay, and that'll end up changing relative location. You can really sit down and look at the math that goes into each of these functions, the difference between carousel location and relative location. It gets a little confusing, but it's because this idea of a continuous scroll is actually really hard to make in SwiftUI. So let's move over to the next function we need to bring over, okay? We need to bring over what happens on drag ended, okay? So I'm gonna paste that. That was up here as well. It's above, the point is that it's above the body, okay? Or it's external to this body. Okay, it should not be, nothing should be inside of this body area, okay? So what this function is saying is it's tracking, it's essentially dealing with this drag, okay? It's saying when you're done dragging on drag ended, it's checking how far you dragged, and it's saying if you dragged at least equal to 200 pixels, you can see how far we dragged up here. If I've dragged at least 200 pixels, I must have committed to going over. You see that? If I drag even 199, it's not going to commit. See? Right here. Let's look at what we had, the actual, yeah. So drag threshold is 200, okay? So let's just drag to, like, let's say 160. It didn't work, right? Because it's not 200. Now if it's 200, it commits. So it checks two things. It checks how far you've dragged. That's this drag.translation.width. But it also does drag.predicted end translation. What that means is, let's say I got to 100, but when I let go at 100, I was going so fast that if I had not let go and I let momentum carry it over, it would have reached 200 on its own. So it's predicting how fast you dragged and trying to see where you would have left off. So that's what drag.predicted end translation is, okay? Let's get rid of this for now so we can see a little clearer. So what you should have now is this variable and this variable. You should have these from earlier. And we just finished copying over on drag ended. Okay? Make sure yours looks identical. All right? And as of now, I have no issues in here. Okay? There are no errors. Okay? So let's look at the next thing we need to bring over. The next thing we need to bring over, now this one is by far the most confusing piece of the entire code. Okay? The get offset function. And the reason it's so confusing, I'll bring it over. I'm gonna paste it in, and I really urge you to actually take the time to try to understand what it's saying. Okay, is because the way it works is this right here has an offset of 0. There's no x offset. This has an x offset of roughly the same width here, plus an extra spacing of 20. Okay, this has, so that's this one. That has a positive offset of that much. This one has a negative offset of that much. Okay, so what's happening is the offset of the next one over is also, it's that times 2, okay? This one is that same thing times 2, all right? So what about all the other views that are not either present, next up, or on deck? Well, all those ones have an offset that is like 1,000, okay? But the biggest thing is we actually need them to get to their location. And then once they get to the on deck location, not the next up, but the on deck location, right up here, then they become present. So the opacity and the offset both need to take into account where the views are next up, okay? Because if you think about it, we need to reuse. We don't want to create, like if I want to scroll over, if I have 7 views and I want to be able to continuously scroll through them 100 times, well, I don't want to create 700 views in this direction, 700 views in the other direction. I want to create reusable views. That's what's better for the memory, okay? So, and in this day and age, memory, I guess, is not that important as it used to be, but it was once upon a time. So this get offset function is saying, look, if the index of the view is equal to the relative location of where we are, then there should be a, let's look at it. Yeah, there should be a, then essentially, so, yeah, sorry. What it's saying is, if this view is the center one, then its offset at any given time should either be 0 or it should be how far I'm dragging in general, okay? And then this one should be how far I'm dragged, these ones on decks should be how far over I've dragged plus that extra factor of being 1 over. And these ones are technically also moving with it, okay? These on decks and the next ups, okay? So that's what these are saying. These are setting the offset, so it's saying if it's equal to the relative location plus 1, and this is if it's equal to the relative location minus 1, okay? And then it's setting how far over the offset should be in the x dimension. And these are for the plus 1 and the minus 1. These are for the plus or minus 2, okay? And then I even actually had to set up not just the on deck one, but so I actually completely forgot I even had to do that. So I have to do the next up, the on deck, and the one that's 1 away as well, because we need the one that is 1 away to actually end up in its position. And once it's there, then it moves forward to on deck, and that's when it becomes opaque. Okay, so there's no need to really get into the nitty gritty of each of these. But what I urge you to do is I'm going to pause, or you can pause, and you can make sure you either copy this identically, okay, or you can kind of read through it and make sure you understand it, or you can just go to the file and drag and drop it into your project as you want. Okay, but that's essentially what these are doing here. Okay. So I'm just going to let you can scroll up and down. So there's the start of the function right here, okay? And it goes all the way down until here. That's the get offset function. The whole point is that it's setting up how the offset works on either side, okay? And that is probably the most complex function. It took me about an hour and a half just to do this function, okay? So let's look at the rest of what we need to bring over, okay? Now the rest of what we need to bring over is really not as crucial. So what I'm going to do is I had a Z stack, and the Z stack essentially let me put this stuff up here behind all of this stuff. Okay, that's just something I wanted for myself. So let's look at that. Here's the first V stack. So first V stack in the Z stack. So I'm going to go back here. I'm gonna minimize all these functions. Okay. So we have get height, get opacity, get offset. Okay. And then I'm going to go to the actual, here's the on drag ended. Here's the body. Okay, I'm just going to go inside the body, Z stack. Okay, and in the Z stack, I just want to put a couple of these text fields. Okay, first I'm going to put the V stack. Okay. And I'm going to just put a text that is always monitoring how far I've dragged. It's also monitoring my location in the carousel. I'm actually going to do this carousel location is equal to. And I'm also going to put relative location. Location is equal to relative location. Okay. So I'll save that. And then I'm going to go over to I'm going to be deleting this section by the end of the project. This is just for us to make sure everything's working properly, because you don't want this in your final aesthetic piece, okay? Then the last piece here is this VStack, okay? So the way it works is this VStack here. I'm gonna copy it as well, and we'll talk about what's in each piece of it, okay? So this VStack contains a Z stack, which contains each of our views. Now, why did we do that? We did that because, remember, like I said, all these views are not actually in an H stack with a scroll view. It's not that. But rather, we kind of paginated them by putting them on, they're all on top of each other in the Z dimension and then offset to the left and to the right, okay? So we have each of those views on top of each other, all right? And within, so I put a for each loop. That for each loop loops through all the views that we feed into the carousel view. Okay, that is this variable right here. Right now it has no value, but when you actually use an instance of carousel view, you have to feed it a set of views. Okay, so what it does is for each view that you feed it, it goes through and it displays. First, it creates a spacer, so it creates a VStack. Inside that VStack is a spacer on top and a spacer on bottom, and in between is the view that you fed it. Okay. That view, I gave it a width of 300, which is essentially this size, okay? And I gave it a height of self.getHeight, okay? And getHeight, if you remember, had item height as the official height, and item height was a variable. It's another variable that you have to feed it when you actually create it. So you'll see what I mean momentarily. Then the next step was animation. So we animated the height, okay? So these are the animation settings we chose, and that creates this smooth animation. See that height animation right there? Okay. And then we give it a background color of white. I could not give it a clear because for some reason when I had a clear background, it actually would only stay this size. Okay. I mean, if you know anything about that, please feel free to share. What else? Gave it a corner radius of 10. That's this. Okay. I gave it a shadow of 2 and 8. That's kind of this shadow. I mean, honestly, I'm probably going to end up getting rid of it. I don't like that. I probably just like something like that a little better. It's opacity. You need to have this opacity here because that is what allows things to hide while they get into the proper position, okay? And that goes to the get opacity function. The offset uses the get offset function we created. And this animates that offset, and we should probably even animate the opacity. So opacity. Okay, save it. And I guess technically if you run it, nothing's going to happen because so far our actual content view just shows hello world. But now, why don't we actually give content view a carousel view? Carousel view is going to need to give in an item height and some views. So I'm going to give it an item height of 500. So that's going to dictate that it's going to be 500 tall. And now for views, here's where it gets fun. I can actually start putting my views in. Okay, so the views I want to put in, instead of writing them all out again, I'm going to show you the views that I chose, okay? And you can put whatever views you want. I put some fun views to really show us the power of Carousel View now, okay? I put my first view, so notice that it needs to be given any views, okay? So you can do some typecasting. So I can't just feed it, say, text of hello, okay? It doesn't like that. It's going to say can't convert text to any view. But what I can do is I can just put any view on the outside like that, okay? And anything you would have used as a view before can now be used as a view again, okay? So I'm going to give it a circle. That's the first thing I want to give mine. So that's a circle with it's a red circle that's a height and width of 50. Okay, the next thing I want to give it is probably just, let's just say this one is, let's say, view number 2. Okay. The next thing I want to give it is, this is where I get kind of fun. So next thing I want is the view. I'm going to give it a view with a text field in it. Okay. But one thing that's important is, just in general, when you create a text field, you need to make sure you have the, oh, you know what? Let me do something silly here. I'm going to take all that. Okay. Sorry, that should have been up here. That should not have been in the previous section. That should have been up here. Okay. And under body. Okay. So for that text field, just whenever you create a text field, you need to create a state variable to manage what's in that text field. So state var text field underscore val. It's going to be equal to, let's do that. Okay. Let's create another one. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay. Let's create another one. We also want to put maybe this one. I'm also going to create a new state variable called heart filled, okay? I'm going to use that for a button. So I'm going to say my next view is going to be in any view that says, I'm going to grab and put in here. And that content is going to be a VStack. Actually, I need to do a VStack. Why did I do VStack? It's irrelevant. We'll just say in any view that says if, that's why I did it. For some reason, it doesn't like having an argument, it doesn't like having an if statement as the direct inside of an any view, so I just put it inside a VStack. Could have been anything. Could have been a ZStack for all I care. Anything. Let's just make it a ZStack, okay? So I'll say if heart filled, so if that's true, if that's false, then we're going to make it just heart. And if it's true, we're going to make it the filled version of the SF symbol. Okay. Now I'm going to add another one. Okay. And I'm actually going to put it up here. I'm going to put it before this heart stuff. Okay. And that one is monitoring whatever I put in that text field. Okay. So I created a text that has a ternary operator that says if the value is equal, this is just a text, okay? The point is that it's a text. So if you're not really familiar with ternary operators, don't worry about it. Just put any random text. What I did is I said, this text field said, and then I put the value of that text field, okay? I'm putting some complex views in there, or complex ideas to help you really see that this is fully functional, okay? And then the last two views I'm going to put in here are going to be, one is a button, okay? And that button, when you click on fill, the button says fill the heart, and when you click on it, it toggles whether or not the heart is filled, okay? The last one is just, let's say, last view, okay? Now if I save it and I run it, let's see what we get. Here we go. View number 2. You can even see this one starting to fill up, actually. Look at that. So that one, fill the heart. You see what we're doing? So this is actually able to manage that one. Sorry, we should go back. We can just hit return to get rid of that. But we can go back here and we can make it say anything. Blah, blah. The text field says blah, blah. Okay? And then last view, and then it just keeps repeating over and over and over and over. Okay, let's get rid of that. There you go. The one thing I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to just I'm going to get rid of one more thing here. I don't like this. I want this to move up, first of all, and I want these to go away, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make one last modification. I'm going to get rid, well, instead of getting rid of it, I'm just going to comment it out, okay? You can have that if you want it, if you wanted some troubleshooting with it. I just commented it out, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually, this right here, this text was what was down here. So I'm going to, I cut it, okay? And I'm going to close up this VStack, okay? And I'm just going to put one more VStack on this side of it, so on the top surface, okay? That VStack is going to have a spacer, and underneath it, it'll have the that text again, okay? And that spacer is going to have, we're going to give it a frame. I'm going to give it a height of item height. So that's going to make sure that there's this height, okay? And then I'm going to give that text a padding, okay? And then I'm just going to put a spacer on top and a spacer on bottom. And let's see what that does. That should give us a nicer looking setup. So maybe I'll even push it down a little more. So let's just say plus 30. Let's see what that does. Much better, right? Even 40 would be even a little nicer. Okay, and you can run it. And the nice thing is, if we actually change the height now, so let's go over to Content View. We're just about done with this tutorial, okay? Now I can change this item height to, let's say, 300. Run it. There it is. It's still just underneath, okay? So the only thing left I'm going to do is I just think this would look nicer if it was 50, okay? And when you download this project, I'm going to have it left at 400 here, okay, for the item height. And so if you want to download this project, you can download it as is, and what you'll be getting out is what's going to run right here. And if you want to just download the Carousel View file, then so here's what you're going to download if you download the whole project, okay? And if you want to download just the one file so you can run Carousel View like this, then I'll have that separate file, and all you have to do is the simplest form is literally just, I'm going to comment all this out so you can get a quick look. All you have to do is a bunch of, if you want the simplest form, just a bunch of text, okay, on the cards. You can just make it, say A, okay. Just do a bunch of those, and you'll get the simplest form of it. If you choose to just grab that one file and execute it like so, you'll just get a bunch of these, okay? Also a pretty valid alternative. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Please don't forget to subscribe.